Hello, and welcome everyone to another episode of Intelligentlemen. I am your host, Bill Walker, and I know it's been a while. It's been a while since you heard from me, maybe a couple weeks. Lots been going on. I'll get you caught up with that first, but let me just first start off saying thank you everyone who has supported and who continues to support Intelligentlemen podcast. I really appreciate you. We're really trying to expand and reach a lot more people. Good evening, Ebony. Ebony's in the audience. Hello, Ebony. And we really appreciate all the support that you guys have been giving us and have been, last week. I'll just kind of go into this. Last week, I was a part of a friend of mine. She was on the show some weeks ago. Pam, Miss Honey Renee Gunn, and I was a part of her event, and it went very, very well. I really enjoyed it. It's called the Saturday Self-Love Camp, and it was really good. It was really interesting. It was the King and Queen edition, and so we had a panel of people from all over who are doing tons of just so many great things in the community. It's just so inspiring. It was a very inspiring experience. So I didn't get a chance to record it and share it with you all, but you can check out. We got some good news coming up pretty soon. I'll wait because I want Miss Honey Renee Gunn to come on the show and also kind of talk about what's going on and what we will be doing in the future. And so with that being said, that's kind of what happened last week. And so that's why there was no episode last week. But definitely we appreciate everybody who support and continues to ask about the podcast and continues to want to see it evolve and grow into something that helps a lot of people, because that's the goal. That is the goal. All right. And I wanted to talk a little bit about on this episode and start the discussion about spirituality and how in today's day and age it's so important for us to return back to making that the primary focus of everything that we do. When we talk about history and we talk about these great civilizations, and I read and I love history, and I love to research and learn about ancient civilizations. And so one thing you find that what made a lot of these great civilizations great was, of course, they did things. They had accomplishments, feats and monuments and so on and so forth. But one of the major things that they did was contribute to the culture of humanity, contributed to the elevation of humanity in so many different ways, whether it was laws and or whether it was spiritual knowledge and understanding. They all had that as the focal point of their civilization, which helped it grow to the point of where it was and what it became. And I want to talk about that for a minute, because you have to have something. You have to have a guide. You have to have something that acts as a guide or a compass for you to go anywhere, right? You have to have, whether it's you can think about it like having directions. You can think about it like GPS, whatever you want to call it, intuition, revelation, all of these things, but you have to have something to help lead you to somewhere. So, let's explore that for a minute, because I am of the understanding that, spiritual matters are in everything. There's always spiritual guidance and wisdom that we can find in anything in existence. And so let's look at that for a second. So just the thought of something guiding, right? Just that principle itself of knowing that something can guide, right? That gives a contrast to, hey, Angela's joining. Appreciate you joining again. Ebony says, yes, very true, or you'll be aimlessly wandering. And that's exactly where I was going with this. So there's a contrast to having guidance, which is not having guidance, right? Or aimlessly wandering, and, to know that there is guidance enables you to understand that through wisdom, through some type of thought, through some type of plan, through some type of, forethought, these things were put into existence because it's there. We know it's there because we use it all the time, right? And that's very important to understand, because that gives you kind of a guide to how to look at the spiritual matters about things, because these things are there and they've been there since the beginning. It's not something that, let's take for instance the ancient civilizations who traveled around the world using landmarks, using constellations, navigation, using charts and maps, right? They understood that in order to get somewhere, you had to first know where you are. First had to know where you were in relation to where you're trying to go, right? Because once you know where you are, then you can get your bearings, and then you can go to wherever it is that you're trying to go, right? And during those times, and we may look at it as, that's low tech, right? Being able to look at the stars and the constellations and see, okay, I'm on the continent of Africa, and which of course they didn't call it Africa, but I'm on the continent of Africa and I'm trying to get east. I'm trying to get to the land in the east, So, what can I use to keep my position? Because as we all know, it just driving in streets around a city can get you turned around sometimes. You can take so many turns and say, oh man, I don't know where I am. I got turned around. I'm trying to, get my position, right? I'm trying to get my bearings so I can know which way I need to go, right? And so, with that being said, getting back to the first point, having that ability to guide, to find guidance in things, in places, that's very important. And especially when it comes to your spirituality, right? Having something that guides you, okay? And so, and I'm going somewhere with that too, and it's going to be a little bit later that I'm going to bring that up, but having that ability to guide and find a way, to find a path to get to where you're trying to go, right? Now, when you talk about stuff like that as well, you have to understand that there's point A and then there's point B where you're trying to get to, but there's something in between that, right? We call it the journey, right? So the journey is the biggest part of that. There's a destination and there's a beginning, but the journey is a big part of that. So how you travel to where you're trying to go is just as important as where you're trying to go, okay? Because do you want to just go through it, complaining about it the whole time? Do you want to go through it, not enjoying the experience of it? Who wants to travel somewhere and not see and not enjoy the trip, right? I mean, part of the enjoyment of it is the journey, is the trip, right? When you're taking that trip, and I personally, when I'm, like, even if I'm flying, I like a window seat, because I like to look out and I like to see how the landscape changes, and I like to see, all of the cities or whatever, depending on where you are. Like, if you're flying over the ocean, ain't too much that you can see, but sometimes there is, but so I like to watch the trip go. I want to go on a cross country train ride, that just goes all the way across the country, and just watch the scenic views just go by, and just enjoy that and experience that, right? It's just like that in life. Like, as you're going from one place to another, right? Because there's many destinations. You'll never just have one, right? Well, you only have one beginning and one end, and the end is the beginning, right? Because it's going to be a full circle. You're going to go right back to where you came from, right? And so, but in between there, you plot this course through your life. Okay, I want to get this. I want to do this. I want to see this. I want to be this. I want to have this. Whatever the case may be. But are we really taking the time to enjoy the time in between, to be happy about being who we are and enjoying the time that it takes to get to wherever you're trying to go? To me, that's even more important, because again, it makes up the majority of your physical experience. Like, that time that it takes to get from point A to point B, that's what's important. And also, you never know what is going to happen between point A and point B, right? It may be that you were guided into going to point B because along the way you were going to meet someone that y'all were going to have some kind of interaction, and maybe you changed their life, maybe they changed yours, or maybe you just experienced each other, so with that being said, you have to pay attention to how you're responding to going from point A to point B. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's always going to be something that's going to feel good to you, right? It's not going to always be something that feels good to you in between those times. But you can always choose how you want to feel, right? You don't have to accept it. You don't have to say, well, because this is happening, I'm gonna let it affect me in that way, right? I can still choose to be happy. I can still choose to do whatever it is that makes me happy, right? On the way to wherever I'm going. And I think that's very powerful. I think it's powerful because it helps you to, again, it's a guide. So it helps you to discover yourself, to discover who you are as a being, as a being of light and love, in the physical existence. It helps you to understand who you are, right? Because you're feeling these things and you're seeing these things and you're understanding these things, and so therefore, at that point, you can definitely understand yourself more, right? And shout out to my friend. Her girls make jewelry. They made. I got a couple of 7 chakra bracelets and a howlite necklace from them. I'm gonna put their information in the chat, so anybody wants to go there and buy some from them, definitely support them and what they're doing. It's great, it's great quality and everything, and I really appreciate her for making that. Having a itinerary is helpful on your beginning destination. Yeah. So and let's put that in perspective, right? Having an itinerary, right? So that itinerary can take the form of a lot of things, right? Because we're talking about spiritual matters. So, being that depending on where you're going and depending on what you're trying to do, your itinerary is going to look different. But definitely, so what is an itinerary, right? It is a plan about how you're going to spend the time, right, once you get to your destination, right? So your itinerary looks like, okay, so when I get here, I'm going to do this, right? And Angela, you're absolutely right. When you're talking about spiritual matters, it's important to know that when you get to a certain point, what you're going to do, right? What am I going to do? If I'm in this situation, what am I going to do, right? If I see somebody who needs help, am I going to pass them by, or am I going to help them, right? Because again, we're talking about spiritual matters. So it's not necessarily a physical destination. It may be just a place within yourself of becoming more kind or becoming more grateful, right? So if that's your goal, that's your destination, where you're trying to get to spiritually, then what does that look like? It looks like being more purposeful in your actions, right? So that's your itinerary. You need to be more purposeful about what you're doing, right? So if I am purposeful about it, then I know that when I get into this situation, I know how I feel. One thing that I like to do or practice is whenever I get into a situation like that, I always say to myself that I don't want, I'm not looking for any compensation. I'm not looking for anything for doing this, right? I'm doing it because it feels good, because it's a good thing for me to do. So that's why I always set my intention. So my intention is to do it because it feels good to me to do it. Not because I'm expecting a person to act a certain way, not because I'm expecting them to use it in a certain way. Because again, once you start clouding it, once you start clouding it with things that are outside of yourself, what happens is this. Now you become attuned to whatever that is, whatever it is that you allow to kind of change your intention, your thought, right? Your destiny, your journey, right? You allowed it to change you. So now you become whatever it is that influenced you to do that, right? So because that influence, you allowed that influence in, then it changes so things have substance, right? They have meaning, they have value innately. That's why we always say know your worth, right? And that there is no number value to place on that. That's a very open-ended way of saying that you are priceless. Like there is no price for you, right? There's no price for you. You don't. It's not to say that you can set a price ticket for you. That's the opposite side of that, right? That's how people get manipulated, because they feel like there's a specific price that They got this saying, everybody has a price, right? So people expect that. People expect that there is a point where you're gonna deviate from whatever it is, whatever your principle is, whatever it is that you're trying to be, right? And so they feel like if I do this or give this, then it's gonna change this person, right? But again, that's manipulation. So whenever you're inside of something like that, that is away from your true being, because your true being, is not one that feels that it needs to manipulate. Why? Because of your worth. Because you know that you're worthy of the love and the power and the blessings that come from the source of all good. If you know that you're worthy of that, then why would you need to manipulate someone? You understand what I mean? Why would you need to manipulate somebody if you're always being taken care of? You're always you good. You're always good. Things always work in your favor because it must be so, right? So why would I need to take advantage of anybody? What would be the point in that? It's like saying that somebody who has everything is given to somebody for something, right? There's no reason that I should do that, But again, and I want to make this clear because I don't want people to feel like, you shouldn't do things for money and all that kind of stuff. You can, because you're trading a service or whatever the case may be, a product, you're trading value, right? That's value in a material sense. But we're not talking about material value. We're talking about spiritual value. And there is no price for that, right? The fruits of the spirit are priceless. You can't buy it. There's no way to buy that. You have to become aware, and you have to come into a certain understanding in order for that to manifest in your life anyway. So there is no price to that. It can't be bought. So, and again, because we're talking about two separate planes of existence, we're talking about physical versus spiritual. You can't buy spiritual things with a physical currency. That's not gonna work. It just don't work that way, right? And again, I was born in this universe just like everybody else. I didn't create the laws. I follow them just like everybody else. So I understand that. I understand that there is no way for me to do that, right? There is no way for me to do that. Like I cannot buy the things that don't come from this realm. It's not even in that principle, right? And so, again, so definitely you want to have an itinerary. And that itinerary comes in the form of, some people say your consciousness, your conscious, right? It tells you when you're doing something, when you're doing something wrong, you feel bad about it. You're like, that can be your itinerary, right? That inner compass, that inner voice, that inner being telling you, now that's not right. You shouldn't do that, right? That's your itinerary, right? And it's telling you that because it wants, so let's think about this for a second. Why would there be a contrast? Why would there be a contrast if it was just whatever you wanted to do, right? If it's just whatever you wanted to do, then why is there ever a bad emotion, bad feeling? Why would you have a bad feeling for something, right? You wouldn't, because the bad feeling is the contrast. It in itself is the contrast, right? Now, some of these things, and I was having a conversation with a friend of mine about this, some of these things and these beliefs were given to you. It was given to you. So you sometimes you have to sift through what people have given you as what your compass is, right? And say, no, you shouldn't do that. You should feel this way, right? But we all know as kids, if you watch children, and I love watching children, right? You watch children, you just sit there because you can learn so much from them, right? You can learn from children. Whenever one of the children treats the other children wrong, they know that they treated them wrong, right? And they feel bad about it, right? And the one who was treated wrong cries, and they feel bad, and now they feel bad about it. You see? So this is innate. It's something that's already in you to feel that way. It's not something that you learn, right? That's not something that you learn. And I'll give you an even better example, right? Pain. When you feel pain, and you feel that pain, it's an indicator, right? It sends a signal to your brain. It tells your brain, oh, something's not right. You need to check into that, right? And your brain might come back and say, oh, no, that's just, you just kind of twisted your arm a little bit. That's all that was, right? And so, it's kind of, it's just one of those things. But, but it can be something that's a lot worse, right? It can be an indicator of something that's a lot worse. And so with that, it's good in that sense, right? So when you bringing it back to the spiritual side of it, when you get that feeling and you feel like, okay, this is not feeling good. This is not. I'm not really. That's you telling you that that's not the way. You're deviating from your course, right? And again, that's why we're talking about spirituality in today's day and age, because we're so trained to kind of go with the flow of what is already going on, that when we get those feelings, like something don't feel right, sometimes we choose to ignore it, right? Because we see so many people doing it, we like, okay, well, it's okay, or I'm not gonna let it get me or make or change me because I don't want to, be different, right? And that's again getting back, and this kind of brought us full circle back to what we was talking about. When you're looking for the perception outside of yourself, when you're looking for happiness outside of yourself, whenever you're looking for worthiness outside of yourself, you can become a victim to that type of mentality, right? Of going by what somebody else thinks versus how you feel about it. How do you feel about it, right? Ebony says, okay, wisdom. Yeah, I mean, you gotta, it's one thing to know, right? It's one thing to know something, it's another to apply it. And so when you, and that's where the practice comes in, spiritual practice, right? When you practice doing things to get you to where you're trying to go. Angela says, in your true spiritually, it would direct you to do good and attract good people. It's what you're portraying to the world, right? So let's put that into modern day terms or scientific terms. Let's break it down a little bit, right? So when you're putting things out into existence, right? What they say is it comes back, right? So when you do good, good comes back to you, right? So why is that though? And Angela was talking about that a little bit. It's because it's on the same. So when you think about a radio station, right? And you're like, look, I want to listen to this show, this show, this show, this show. And all those shows are on the same radio station. All you got to do is stay tuned in to that frequency. That's all you got to do. And all the shows will come to you. Back to back, right? the same principle. When you're on that, when you're in that good, when you're in the flow of good things that flows eternally, right? When you're inside of that, then good things must be there. I mean, because that's what it is, right? That's the innate, that's the natural state of being. That's the natural state of that, of good, right? It's the natural state of good to be around other good things. That's why when you're doing, when something is not good, it takes on different characteristics. It takes on characteristics of not wanting to be out in the open, not wanting to be, done in the light, as they say, right? So when it starts to get into that realm, then that's a kind of an indicator letting you know it's not good. Why? Because everybody understands good, especially when it's done to them. You understand good. Like when somebody does something good for you, you understand good. You're like, oh man, I appreciate that. I'm grateful for that, right? But when it comes to putting it out there, sometimes we allow the attachment to the physical to allow us to not go with that. You see? So when it comes to that's why having that compass, having that guide, having that direction, having that destination is so important. Because then when you feel it, because you're gonna feel it one way or another. You're gonna feel the contrast, but then you're gonna know which way to go. You're gonna know, because it's gonna be like, no, this is the way. This is the way that I'm supposed to go, because this is what's good, right? And then therefore you can gauge everything else from that, right? And that's kind of like, you can think of it as a guide to, how you should judge things, right? And I know we feel like we shouldn't judge things, but we always do judge things. So I'm in the mind of thinking like a wise king. If I judge something, I want to judge it with the utmost justice. I don't want to just judge it and judge it based on my personal, ambitions and everything. I want to judge it by the universal scale. I want to judge it by what's truly good, as much as to my ability. And I think that is sufficient, because I can only go. I'm a man that I can only go by what I know and I understand. So when I do it that way, it's always gonna line up. It's always gonna line up, because again, we're all on this spiritual journey, right? And the goal is to elevate. The goal is to elevate. So that's gonna happen, because it's part of the journey. It's part of the whole process, right? It's not to put you down. It's not to bring you down. It's to elevate you. My friend Honey Renee Gunn joining us says that's universal law. Good evening, kings and queens. Good evening, queen. Yes, universal law. It's universal. It applies to everybody at all times, and there's nothing that's outside of that. You can't, there's no solar system, galaxy you can go to that is not going to be true. It's just universal. So when you tap into the universal, right, then it like Angela was saying, it has to be. It's going to be. It's going to direct you. It's just that's the way it happens, right? And we see it over and over and over and over in our own lives. And I'm talking about, think about it from your own perspective, not just looking at other people. I want us to get away from looking at other people to get our perspective. I want us to look at our own experience to get our perspective, because guess what? Everybody's experience is different. Everybody living, everybody who has life and who comes here has a different experience from another person. You can go through the same things, but even if you go through the same thing, your experience can be different because you're experiencing it from your perspective, your mind, from your point of view, right? Your perspective. And so with that being said, you can't gauge it all. You can't gauge it all the same way, right? In the sense that you can, there's universal laws, but you can't say that, okay, that was another conversation I was having with a friend of mine too. You know, you can say the same thing in a different way, which makes both of them true. You just said it in two different ways. That's it. So sometimes, you know, you might find yourself talking to people like, oh yeah, that's yeah, I was saying the same thing, yeah. You know, and you find the connection, right? Which is a blessing within itself. And that's probably for another podcast. We'll talk about that. I did a podcast about connection, but you know, putting it in that light, you know, because when you find that connection between that or between two people, and understand that, wow, this was the purpose. The purpose was to bring this about, to bring this experience into fruition, into existence, right? This is why we are having this conversation right now. If you're listening to this on the podcast, if you're watching this on Facebook, this is the reason why you're hearing this, is because it was meant for you to hear it, right? You brought it into your experience because it was something that you wanted to hear, right? Yeah. So with that being said, there's a couple of things I wanted to kind of talk about as well before time runs out. Still got a little bit of time, so I want to talk about these things. You know, just things that can help with listening to that inner voice, right? And being able to take that and let it help you elevate, right? So, you know, if we're looking at it from that perspective, if we're looking at spirituality and we're looking at the physical, then we're looking at two separate ways of being, right? We're looking at two separate ways of being. And so first you have to understand that. You have to understand that there's the physical and then there's the spiritual, right? Now, if you understand that, then you can understand that there are principles in the physical and there are principles in the spiritual. What are some of the things that stand out the most in both? When you think about spiritual, you think about infinity, right? Infinite. When you think about physical, you think about finite, right? You think about, you know, the end. You think about how things don't last, right? But when you think about spiritual, you think about things lasting forever and having no end, right? So those are two main contrasts between physical and spiritual, okay? Which is very important because, again, we're talking about guides and how things align to show you a way, not a specific way. I was going to say that, but that is not it, because, again, it shows you a way, right? So if I see that it's something that's going to lead to something lower, we'll call physical lower and we'll call spiritual higher, right? That's another contrast people understand about spirituality and the physical, right? So we'll call it higher and lower. So if I understand that my lower wants something, then I can look at it as in direct opposite of what spiritual is, right? So let's put that in perspective. So if my lower self wants to accumulate things, it wants to have things, it wants to own things. I want to have this, and I want it to be mine, and I want it to, I want to know people know that it's mine. That is in contrast with the spiritual, where because the lesson is this: you don't own anything. You don't own anything. Let alone anyone, right? And this is very important because it helps you in relationships. It helps you when you relate to people and things. When you understand that I don't own this, I may have it, right? And I may have responsibility for it, right? But I don't own it, right? It's not something, and people, that ancient wisdom, comes through our elders. They say it all the time. You can't take it with you. You can't take it with you. You can't take it with you where, right? The higher and the lower, meaning you're gonna pass into something else, and when you do that, you can't take none of that with you, nothing. So you should never have a mind of attachment on things, on physical things, or on people. You don't attach to it. But with the spiritual mind, how does that work? So what are you supposed to feel? How are you supposed to look at it, right? Well, what is spiritual about it? For me, it's grateful. Like, I feel grateful for being around people. I feel grateful for their kindness. I feel grateful for them sharing with me, right? I feel gratitude. Gratitude is what I feel, right? Because I understand you don't have to do it, because I'm not attached to it. See, I know you don't have to do it, because I know I don't have to do it. And see, again, when you understand that on a universal level, then when you understand yourself, then you can understand others, right? So I understand that. I understand that I can't force anybody to do anything. Just why do I understand that? Because nobody can force me to do anything either. You can't be forced, right? So when it comes to the spiritual, those fruits come about because when it's gratitude, and I was it's funny because the tea I'm drinking some ginger tea, and it's kind of spicy too, but they have little sayings on there, and this saying says gratitude leads to love. Now, why would gratitude lead to love? It goes back to exactly what we're talking about, right? Because when you're grateful, see, when you don't have an expectation, when I don't expect you to love me, I don't expect it, right? Which means I'm grateful when you do give me your love. When you do love me, I'm grateful because I know that you don't have to, and I don't expect you to do it. But when you do it, I am grateful. Therefore, I close the circle. So now it's connected. So I'm not trying to capture it, right? I'm not trying to hold it, but I am appreciating it. And I'm appreciating it from my perspective. So I'm appreciating you, right? So when I say, I appreciate everybody for supporting me, it's because I know you don't have to. I know you could be doing a million things other than listening to this podcast or watching this video. You could be doing a million things. But if you choose to spend some time to listen to me, then I appreciate it, because you have shown kindness, you have shown love towards me, you know. And so again, when it comes to the spiritual and the physical, it's very intangible. You know, that's another difference that people associate with those two states, right? Spiritual is intangible, physical is tangible. But here's the catch to that. If I am to understand that spiritual is eternal, if I'm to understand that, then which one is really which one is really there and which one is really not? See, that's how it can play a trick on you. And that's how it can fool you into thinking that because you can feel it, because you can physically, with your senses, feel something, right? That it holds precedence over what you can't physically feel, right? Your emotions, right? Your emotions, they're intangible. They're intangible. You don't literally feel your emotions, even though we say we feel emotions. You don't feel them. You feel them in a spiritual sense, right? The same way that if you said to yourself, I love you, without speaking, right? Without saying it physically, without uttering the sound. If I say I love you without the sound, did I still say I love you? I did, right? But where did that voice come from? That's an exercise everybody can try. Try to say something to yourself without speaking it. And everybody can do it, because we do it all the time. We call it thinking, you know, right? We say thinking, but say something without speaking, right? And you'll hear it like the sound came. You'll hear it, but there was no sound. There was no vibration. Correction. There was no vibration on the sound frequency. There was vibration on the thought frequency, right? Which is intangible. That's even more intangible than sound. Sound can physically affect things, right? At a high frequency, sound can shatter glass. Sound can do a whole bunch of things, right? So it can affect that. So what does that mean about your mind? What does that mean about your thoughts? At a high enough frequency, you can affect things, but it affects it in a different way. That's why they say, be careful what you put into your mind, because what you put in is what you're going to put out, right? So, and that's just kind of getting into, and now we're just scratching the surface, right? Because another thing I like to tell people, the difference between spiritual and physical, infinite and finite. If infinite is an infinite, right? And we say that there's infinite wisdom, infinite knowledge, infinite love. That means there's no end to it. There is no end. So how can I say that I have the best way? How can I say that I have I know the way that we're supposed to love everybody. I got the way. That's it. There is no other way. I can't say that and be truthful about it. I can't say that because I'm limiting the nature of the spiritual. And as soon as you put a limit on it, it is no longer spiritual, right? Because spiritual is what? Infinite. There is no end to it. So you can't, as soon as you put a limit, that's why they say the sky is the limit, right? But even that is a limit. When you truly think that there is no limit, there is nothing that cannot happen. There is nothing that won't be, right? All things that can be thought will be thought. All things that can be done will be done. Why? Because it's infinite. So when I say these things, I'm not trying to say that it's the only way. I'm not trying to say that this is the only way. I'm just saying that from my understanding and from my perspective and from my experiences, this is how I have come to this understanding. And I'm sharing it with everybody because it must be so. There is no, you don't have light and not share it. That's not the nature of light. The nature of light is not to be hid. It's not to be, the nature of light is to be seen. That's why your eyes translate light. That's why they translate light. You see the connection? This that was created, your eye, translates light. Meaning light was meant to be seen. You see? So it's not something for you to hide. And I say this to you with all appreciation and gratitude. Your light, your inner light is meant to be seen. So never be afraid to show your light. Never be afraid to show these things that you know and that you understand, because that is not the nature of light. That is not the nature of good. It's not the nature to want to hide it. That's not its nature. All right. Now, I want to say also, but first let me address the comment. Honey Renee Gunn says, your eye gate and your ear gate, you have to be guardians of the gates. Facts. So yes, you have to be guardians. But see, this is the thing, and I'm gonna go a little bit deeper. And I know we're running out of time here, but this is a deep conversation because I was reading something lately. I've been reading something lately, and I came to an understanding about something. It's a beautiful understanding, and I enjoy life so much. It's as it unfolds and I learn more, it's just more to behold, more beauty, more love than I can ever know. Okay, so you know what guards the gates? It's not you. It's not really you that's guarding, right? Now, when you're at a place where you're learning, you may need to, look at things that help you more than you look at things that would not be beneficial for you, right? But what happens, see, there's a point where the scales flip, right? There's a tipping point where the scales tip. And so when that happens, it's not even really about guarding anymore. Because as Angela said, and as we come to understand this, right? The attraction, you become the quality of what it is that you're focusing on. So when you're focusing on the good and you become that, the other stuff can't really get to you. It can't even get to you So again and again, but the perfect personification of that is the spiritual, right? That's the perfect personification. So we're still talking. So you have physical limitations, right? Because you're in the physical body, so there are physical limitations. But that doesn't apply to the spirit, though, right? So even though you may, that's why some people can be put into some of the worst situations and still come out with such beautiful spirits, because it wasn't allowed to come into them, you see. So, which is such a blessing. I mean, for it to be set that way, for it to be able to happen that way, is a blessing, because it allows those beautiful souls to manifest and to shine their light onto the world, right? And it's such a beautiful thing. But yes, definitely, you want to guard these things, because you want to make sure that you, and that's what guards it, like your guide, your compass. It tells you, it's not, because you may start reading it and be like, like I'm like that all the time. Like I'll be watching something, something to come across my line or whatever, and I'm just like, and I just go straight past it. I won't judge it. I just go straight past it because it's not for me. You see what I'm saying? Like I just know it's not for me. So it's not. I don't even have to take it. So it's not even about me trying to judge it or try to say that it's this or whatever. I'm not trying to put it in any kind of light. Literally, I'm not even trying to put it in any kind of light, because it's not for me. But you'll feel when it's for you, and you know when it's for you. When you attune, when you start feeling, when you get more conscious and more sensitive to that vibration, then you'll feel it. It's an automatic feeling. You just feel it. You know, it's not even. You don't even have to think about it. It doesn't even, the thought about it goes away, because you are not your body and you are not your mind. You are the eternal spirit that resides within. So if you're the eternal spirit, it's not confined by the physical. See, that's the trick, right? It tricks us, because we think, because it's wrapped inside of it, because it's contained in that, we think that it's part of it, but it's not really a part of it, even though it can't be separated, right? And like I said, that's a deep conversation, but we're not going to get to, because we only got a couple more minutes, and I just want to give a shout out to everybody who watches, who listens, and I appreciate you so much. I really do. I promise you, and I hope you can feel the energy and the gratitude through my words, through the sounds that you hear coming from me, and if you're watching this through the light from my smile towards you, that I really appreciate you, and I really appreciate all that y'all do. Ebony says thank you for sharing. Thank you, Ebony, for joining. Thank you, Honey Renee Gunn, for commenting. Thank you for joining as always. You two ladies always, and Miss Angela, y'all always support, and I appreciate you, and everybody else who didn't want to say anything but came in to support and to watch. I really appreciate you. Have a good night, Honey Renee Gunn. Thanks for sharing, and thank you for sharing. And yes, Angela, it is a blessing. It's a blessing, and you know, that's what we need. We need more of that. We need more of that. We need more time to really understand why and how these things happen, right? Because that's where the understanding comes from. Okay. And with that, I'm gonna sign off, and I appreciate everybody, and I'm definitely gonna make sure that I keep that 7 o'clock Tuesday schedule. Just bear with me, because things do come up, and I may need to kind of adjust that, but I appreciate everybody's patience, and thank you for your support. Latoya just joined in, said you missed it, but it lives on, so you'll definitely be able to hear it. I appreciate you too, and we'll see you on the next one. Y'all take care and be safe. Love, light, peace.
Thank you. This right here is what needed to be said because people need to tune into their spirituality more than the physical world. We have, of course, we're humans, but we're humans having a humanist spirit, having a human experience. So thank you.